What's going on, everybody? Today we are breaking down all things about the 2025 Cincinnati Bengals, including just how high is too high to draft Tee Higgins, because let's face it, we all know Jamar Chase is the wide receiver one. What to make of Chase Brown's season and some of the stark splits before Zach Moss got injured. If Joe Burrow is someone who we should be prioritizing well above any other pocket passer in the league. Mike Gesicki propaganda in the year 2025. All that and much more here on today's Fantasy Life show. Joining me, as always, though, we have none other than Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, all-around baller. We got Dwain, the Rock McFarland, in the house. And Dwain, let's get right into it looking at this wide receiver room because, man, this was just a fantasy gold mine last year. It was a bad defense combined with a great offense. And accordingly, for anyone, other than Bengals fans, lots of entertainment week in and week out. So again, all of our rankers, I'm assuming you listen to this right now, also have Jamar Chase as the wide receiver one. That's fine and well, and we can hype him up some if you want. But I think the bigger question is, man, how high is too high to draft Tee Higgins? Obviously got paid, maybe a bit more of a one-year deal than some of those initial numbers suggest, as is the case with plenty of NFL contracts. But we're talking about a guy who I believe finished as the wide receiver 5 in PPR points per game last year. That's a pretty nice ceiling despite being the second banana in his own offense.
Yeah, look, we love the fact that he gets to play with Joe Burrow. We love the fact that this is going to be a pass-first type of offense. And that can often be okay, even if you're the number 2 banana to a guy like Jamar Chase. However, there are some concerns here, Ian. So it comes down to the other players going around Tee Higgins. I think the market is pretty accurately priced. Having said that, I do think there's plenty of room for downside here for where Tee Higgins is going, which was right now at the 2-3 turn in 12-team drafts. I think that could be a tad high. The challenge starts to become when you look at the other names going around him, who do you want to take over him? But let's just talk about Tee Higgins for a second. We can come back to some of those decisions and see which ones we would want to make. But if we look at Higgins, the biggest thing last year, touchdowns, man. Okay, so his touchdowns per route run, and I'll start in 2020 and I'll end in 2024, 1.2, 1.2, 1.3, 1.3. By the way, guys, those are really good numbers for a wide receiver. Last year, 2.2%. So he was just on an astronomical run when it comes to how many touchdowns he was catching per route. And he's going to be due to regress closer back to the numbers that we've seen before. So with the touchdowns coming down, the question is really, what is this talent profile that we're dealing here with Tee Higgins? Taking into account that he does have Jamar Chase there. So if we look at what he has done, Ian, since 2020, from a target earning perspective, a 19% target share, that's wide receiver 3. A 25% target share in 2021. That is a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. 2022, 18%. 2023, 18%. 2024, it was back to 24%. So we have 2 of these years that say high-end wide receiver 2, borderline wide receiver 1, target earner, and then all the rest of the years say wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 4, target earner. So he's one of these really interesting profiles where you could say it's either or. Now, here's the thing, though. We've seen him in the games without Jamar Chase, and the dude has gone absolutely bonkers. So I think we know that Tee Higgins probably is closer to a wide receiver 1 than wide receiver 2. And that's ultimately what tilts me towards being if you want to take Tee Higgins at the beginning of round 3, again, when we start comparing him to the other players that are there, I get it. But I will say this, he could finish closer, Ian, to where the other wide receiver 2s that have very similar profiles to his are going, which would be guys like Jalen Waddle going 2 or 3 rounds later. This is the way it happens all the time. These guys just kind of jostle around, and the next year we could be arguing, should we be taking Jalen Waddle at the 2-3 turn because he has a good year, right? And we'll be doing the same thing. So some of this just comes down to variance, the way the season ultimately ends up working out. So I think the things that make me the most okay with it, though, are the fact that we do expect the Bengals to be one of the teams that throws the ball the most. Right. When we look at Miami and what they do, they also want to run the ball a little bit more. So when we talk about Jalen Waddle, I do agree Tee Higgins should go ahead of him. But again, he is a wide receiver 2 with a really good wide receiver 1 in front of him, and that can be problematic. So really, really interested in your thoughts. Again, I think he's right around where he should go, but I could see him missing. I could see us looking up next year and drafting him as a wide receiver round 4. I think we could easily be drafting him in round 4 instead of late round 2 or early round 3.
It is funny how this time last year, guys like Waddle, even Devonta Smith a few years before, they were getting this early round treatment. What happens? They kind of have an off year, and all of a sudden they're the ones buried, even though what has really changed, maybe not all that much. So I don't think we need to draft Tee Higgins as this 1 year boom. Yes, last year was his best season with that wide receiver 5 finish. But man, even in 2021, 2022, we're talking about wide receiver 12 and wide receiver 19 numbers. And again, it's a situation where, we talked in our Ravens team preview, Dwain, like, well, what if this defense is really good and they just end up kind of being able to lean on the run? Don't think we have that same concern going on in Cincy, considering the organization seemingly doesn't want to pay their edge rushers, 1 cent more than they have to. So we'll see what happens with Trey Hendrickson, Stewart, and all that jazz going on. But I will say, again, Higgins, someone who I think you can realistically rank inside your top 15, maybe even wide receiver 12 and not get too many issues from me. I've been drafting him at the beginning of round 3. Okay. When I'm looking at him next to guys like Jonathan Taylor, Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, even Trey McBride, I've been going after the other positions. And honestly, Tee Higgins versus someone like Tyreek Hill, Tee Higgins versus someone like Rashee Rice, I just haven't even prioritizing him in that group. So price has been a little bit too steep for me. Again, tough for me to say, oh, he should be going round 4, round 5. But again, when I'm on the clock, when I have been drafting, I haven't really been taking him.
So we're the same. I've been taking Bucky Irving over him. I take Jonathan Taylor over him. I take Rashee Rice over him. I take Trey McBride over him. I take Tyreek Hill over him, to your point. I think when you start talking about Marvin Harrison, I lean a little towards Marv. You're probably leaning towards Tee Higgins. I mean, those are closer. But you've even got Josh Jacobs in this range. I mean, Josh Jacobs, versus Tee Higgins. So he's just in a really tough spot. I do think very clearly I want Ladd, Jonathan Taylor, Bucky Irving, Rashee Rice all over Tee Higgins. I would go ahead and throw Tyreek Hill. I just think that the ceiling case for Tyreek Hill is much higher without an injury. If all of a sudden, knock on wood, never want it to happen, Jamar Chase misses 6 or 7 games, Tee Higgins is ranking in our top 6 wide receivers. So that tells you what really ultimately where we land on his talent profile. So there are paths, right, to T, having this monster season, but it has to come at the expense of one of his teammates. Whereas a lot of these other guys, it's like we could see a path without an injury to a teammate, and that becomes the challenge.
And honestly, again, I talked about my hatred for just labeling guys as more injury prone than others. But if we were going to look at a wide receiver with a little bit more of a wonky eye than usual, man, Higgins has had a hamstring injury of some degree in every single year since 2019, even going back to the days at Clemson, man. So certainly if you guys like myself have owned, Higgins in fantasy leagues over the year, how annoying it is trying to get anything out of Zach Taylor during the week. And we have had some of those emergency only games that have actually skewed some of those per game numbers I've mentioned earlier in the show. So again, not saying Higgins is egregiously mispriced. I have been going in another direction normally, though, in the early rounds of drafts.
Ian, JSN versus Tee Higgins. JSN versus Tee Higgins.
I think I go Tee Higgins there. I'm a little bit lower on JSN, though.
But it's also close. It took you a second. It's still close because we have a young player with JSN that's ascending. So, yeah, again, it's a tough range. Sorry, what were you about to ask about Jamar Chase?
Oh, yeah, you're good. But no, I agree. Again, we've said this before. After AJB and Ladd McConkey, I think that's a long tier of guys where, again, not egregious to put Ladd ahead of T. I'm not saying that, but I also don't think T necessarily deserves to be outright that far ahead of really the rest of these guys. But, yeah, just quickly, Jamar Chase, he's been going 101 in a lot of these drafts. In a 3 wide receiver league, Dwain, we'll say full PPR. I think a lot of people, that is your base home league settings. Jamar Chase, 101. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about it regardless of settings, unless you move to standard league. Then I think you got to be thinking about one of the running backs with Bijan or Saquon Barkley. But as long as it's 3 starting wide receivers, you're probably going Jamar Chase. The one argument would be standard. Even with 3, you might decide to go with the running back. I don't think it would be something where people can argue and be like, oh my God, you made the wrong choice. They're going to both be good players, but ultimately, yeah, Jamar Chase is pretty much my 101 across all the formats. If you go look at the ranks over on Fantasy Life.
Super late round darts. Any interest in Andre Yoshivas or perhaps keeping a candle lit for Jermaine Burton?
Yoshivas is a guy that, last year had pretty good route participation, so that works in best ball. Again, best ball, we don't need guys that have 25% target shares, right? It's fine if they've got an 18. It's fine if they got a 16%, right? But we know that they're going to be on the field. That ultimately means they're going to give you 2 or 3 spike weeks, and that's all you care about. And it's going to help you in best ball, not someone you're drafting in redraft or managed leagues even late. If I'm in a redraft format, the guy I want is Jermaine Burton. I want the guy that suddenly could explode. Maybe he doesn't, but I don't care. I can cut him and I can get rid of him. Jermaine Burton's a little bit of a tougher profile to nail whenever you start thinking about best ball, because he could be a zero. And we know that zeros in your lineup is very bad. And you can't have that going on all season. The more zeros you have on that lineup, even if you get a team that manages to make it into the finals, like that is the biggest driver to your success rate really tanking. So difficult in best ball, which is so funny because kind of if you think about it, I think a lot of people think about it the opposite. I don't need to get it right. It's just Jermaine Burton, man. If he goes off in best ball, I don't got to pick. Yeah, but he could give you zeros all year. And you don't have the ability to change your roster. It's kind of the opposite. Yoshivas would be the guy to lean into. I think the one risky part with it and why I haven't clicked it much, Ian, is Jermaine Burton might be enough of a risk factor to take away some of those routes that we're kind of thinking Yoshivas has. Yeah. He could turn that into maybe a split between those two. And I've taken Yoshivas, I think, once or twice on like Burrow stacks. But even then, I was kind of thinking, this might not be as sure of a thing like as I think it is when it comes to him. So mostly just been sticking to Tee Higgins, Jamar Chase. We'll talk about a tight end that I think we both do take a little bit later in the drafts here in a minute.
That is another factor with, again, thinking, what would happen if Higgins or Chase missed some time? I do think, Mr. Big Slot, Mike Gesicki himself, actually be the one to see the heightened role as opposed to one of these wide receivers. So I'm with you, Yoshivas. Maybe drafting him a couple more times than you, but in that late, we're talking like wide receiver 80 range, pure dart throw in drafts. Darius Slayton, Diami Brown have been the two guys I have leaned towards there. All right, guys, plenty more to get to. First, though, a quick word from our friends over at Bud Light.
Check out the new whip.
Tight.
Fully custom.
How many Bud Lights can you fit in that puppy?
As many Bud Lights as it takes.
That's a lot of Bud Lights. You have to give me one of those.
All right, Dwain, someone who helped win many a fantasy championship, albeit had a pretty shishy week 17 with the amount of times he was stopped at the 1 yard line. Chase Brown, perceived RB1 going into the 2025 season. However, it was not always that clean for him last year. Lest we forget, Zach Moss really was being a thorn in the side to everyone that was, trying to get Chase Brown to become a thing first 8 weeks of the year. That said, once Moss was out of the picture, we legit saw like a CMC-esque 90% snap rate for Chase Brown more weeks than not. So we do have Zach Moss back. However, I think the Bengals saw what happened down the stretch of last year, and that was Chase Brown being a very competent every down back. Samaje Perine also there as well. So when I say, Dwain, I know you love these questions. What is more likely, a top 10 RB finish for Chase Brown or numbers that will actually finish outside the top 20?
I'm going to go with the top 10 running back finish, but I will say, there's a question, but I'm going to go with it because he's the young player. I thought he was just good enough last year to hold on to the job, not like he's elite. And also, guys, we talked about this, efficiency numbers, as much as we like to look at them, they don't always equate to how many touches a player gets the next year. There's other things that coaches are looking at and thinking about, so we can't always be thinking like linearly, he was a good player, he gets more carries. Just doesn't always work out that way, or he keeps his carries. But young, just good enough in the things that we like to look at. It's a really nice offense that we expect to score a lot of points, even though it will be pass heavy. And still overall, I think the challengers on the depth chart, and you might argue with me on this, I think overall they're pretty weak. If we look at it and we're like, okay, Samaje Perine, he's been a nice passing down back, but it's not like he ever turned into anything that would truly threaten Chase Brown. Maybe he takes some of the passing down work. Zach Moss, has had a season here or there, but last year Chase Brown was really already starting to take over the role from him before the injury. Unfortunate injury, the neck injury that ended the year for Zach Moss. I know Taj Brooks has a hive out there, and Matthew Waldman, one of our favorites, writes the RSP. If you guys haven't seen that, make sure you go check it out. He does love Taj Brooks and talks about him being a guy that if he gets his opportunity, he might be a massive waiver wire darling this year. But when I look at that group overall, while I could see all of them contributing a little bit, I just don't see a reason to take a bunch of the workload away from Chase Brown. Now, having said all that, we don't have him projected for an 80% snap share like how he finished last year. We've got this guy basically getting 60% of the carries, right? We're not saying, and the highest that I typically give out is 67, 68%. So I don't have him in that range. I have him losing some work to these other guys, but still really remaining, that lead back. If you look at all of his underlying data points, Ian, whether it's targets per outrun, yards per carry, yards after contact, missed tackles forced, explosive rush rate, they're all running back 1, running back 2, or running back 3 worthy, right? Yeah. So he's replacement level in a lot of categories, running back 1 level in a few categories. So I think overall he's an above replacement level running back, but not by a lot. So that last part is the one thing that makes it risky. Because if you do come out, right, and you're making errors, say you suddenly start fumbling, you start missing blitz pickups, things like that, I don't know that his talent profile is so far up there that coaches are going to be willing to say, you know, man, he's just so good, we can't take him off the field. I think he is in a range where they could siphon away some of the opportunities from him. So a little bit of a concern, but I am going to go with top 10 for all the reasons that I name. But I definitely think Chase Brown is a player that we can't just dismiss as having zero risk. I think a lot of people do, just because he had a huge workload and he was young. But if you look at all the rest of the picture, and those are good things, but if you look at all the rest of the picture, I do think there are paths to downside here.
Again, guys, weeks 1 through 8, alongside Zach Moss, who I agree is not someone who should have been this big thorn in the side. Just a 39% snap rate, RB 33 numbers in PPR points per game. After 85% snaps and 20.9 PPR points per game, good for the 4th highest mark among all running backs. Dwain, if we had the opportunity, this might have to be a future podcast episode for us. If we could peek behind the curtains, get 1 or 2 answers to the test now, from week 1, the Bengals RB snap rates in week 1 would be, near the top of my list. Because I do think there's a chance that we could see Chase Brown getting 85%. And then guess what? He's probably going to be a top 5 running back the rest of the way. But if they go 50, 25, 25, it's in the realm of possibilities, man. And when we do have to draft him as a top 12 running back, I will admit I haven't gone super far out of my way. I don't want to fade the guy because I fully see, what we could be talking about. It's what happened down the stretch of last year. But we have Breece Hall right there. We have Kyren Williams right there. Chase Brown's only going 3 picks behind Josh Jacobs. Give me Josh Jacobs every single time.
Yeah, and going ahead of Kyren Williams, who's a very similar profile.
Yeah.
That you're getting later, going ahead of Breece Hall. Again, I've been taking some Chase Brown, and I think there are people that feel differently than me about Chase Brown, and I think a lot of it comes down to what an explosive player he is. The problem is, we haven't seen that play out. We know that Chase Brown has great straight line speed, right? And if you look at his testing, all those different things, you're going to like Chase Brown. The problem is last year, only 10% of his carries went for 10 plus yards. Now that's still slightly above the NFL average of 9.5. So I think if last year was a fluke and really there's more meat on the bone there and he could be a 14, 15% explosive rush rate guy, more like a Jahmyr Gibbs, some of these other players based on the underlying data. And guys, this is why athletic testing doesn't always work out. Right? It's great that you can be fast, but you've also got to read the hole. You've got to anticipate the hole. You have to follow the right block. You got to manipulate the linebackers like Ian waiting on the next side, ready to rip your head off. There's so many things that go into explosive rush rate that have nothing to do with speed. Now, if you can do those things and you're fast, that means instead of just getting a 10-yard carry, you might get an 80-yard carry to the house. And we do care about that because those are free long touchdowns that we can get. So that's the one outstanding question. Is he really this more explosive player than what we saw last year? And the athletic testing, does, unlock itself in a way this year that we didn't see. Because if he does that, I think he's going to be pretty safe with maintaining. He's not going to get 85% of the snaps, but he might get 65%, which in the Bengals offense will be enough to be a borderline running back 1. So I'm with you. I think that having the answers to the test, the Bengals backfield would be one of them. But I'm going to go ahead and lean to Chase Brown. I don't think the competition is that stout. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, even though there is some risk.
I'm honestly a little more worried about Perine. I don't think he's taking the job by any stretch, but we saw Joe Mixon put forward a lot more good years and just a longer term, I guess, as the Bengals RB1. Perine had 51 targets on that 2022 Bengals team, all right? It's one of these situations where maybe I am too worried about it, but it's similar to my concerns with Isaiah Pacheco, who's going a hell of a lot cheaper in drafts right now, with Kareem Hunt, all right? I know it's Kareem Hunt in the year 2025. I'm not so sure Andy Reid and the Chiefs look at him, as down as the rest of us do. So, man, if Chase Brown was going literally a round later, man, I would be fine with it. But when he is next to guys like Kyren Williams, Breece Hall, and Josh Jacobs, even James Cook, man, just really has been tough for me to pull the trigger at that cost. I will say I was grinding some numbers last night. These are the fun things I like to do on Monday night, Dwayne. I want to see what teams actually left their running backs on the field for the most snaps last season. Number 1 team in terms of 90% snaps, all right? Very, very high number, incredible number to even see in today's NFL. The Rams were number 1, 29% of their games. They did leave Kyren Williams on the field for 90% plus snaps. Number 2, though, Or the Bengals at 18%. So again, when you are looking at the offenses, the play callers who will just say, F it, go out there. You're only coming to the sideline. If you need a breather after a big run, Chase Brown, Zach Taylor could be that fit. So the upside is there. We will see, what ends up happening. Let's go ahead and talk about Mr. Number 9 under center, Dwain. It is Joe Burrow, making some news recently for his fashion choices. I love, Chuck Bass is a good friend of mine, always a fun follow on Twitter. He said Joe Burrow looked like if LimeWire came out as a person. Fun little throwback there. But with Joe, and again, it's a situation where we've seen the highs. I mean, multiple top 5 finishes, or at least multiple top 8. Last year is a top 5 quarterback in Fantasyland, despite not giving us a ton on the ground. Accordingly, now he is being priced as the QB5, basically the most expensive guy who we aren't going to be getting, all the Josh Allen, Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts rushing upside from. Do you think this is inflated? Because again, typically we shouldn't be going out of our way for these archetypes. As I've talked about, guys with, top 50 overall ADP, most of them do end up, at least giving us top 12 production. That said, Burrow, Stroud, and Herbert are the 3 that have, gotten us in past years. So thoughts on Joe Burrow and whether you are willing to buy him as a legit top 50 pick in fantasy?
Yeah, definitely willing. I'm not worried about it with him. A, we've got this pass-heavy offense. B, he's a complete badass. C, he has great weapons. And if we look at him, you put all that together, right? And that's ultimately what you're getting here with Joe Burrow and why we are willing to take him. 23 fantasy points per game. And so if we look at his last 2 healthy years, 23 fantasy points per game, that's the QB3. And then 22.7 fantasy points per game, that was the QB4 back in 2022. So the other thing is, if we go back and we look at the research that I did, which combines really what quarterbacks have done in passing and combine that with what they've done as rushers, right? So he falls into the archetype of being a great passer with 10 to 19 rushing yards per game upside. So if you look at his last 2 healthy years, he's thrown for 289 yards per game, 2.5 and 2.2 passing touchdowns per game. And then his rushing yards, 11.8 and 16 rushing yards per game. So Burrow is a guy that can actually move around a little bit more than what a lot of people think. We're not going to confuse him, to your point, for being one of these guys, not even a Caleb Williams or a Bo Nix, not even at that level, but one tier below that. And so whenever you look at the hit rate, Ian, since 2011 of guys that have hit that range of being a 275 to 300 yard passer and 11 to 19 rushing yards per game, and they hit 22 plus fantasy points per game, 71% of the time. So Burrow's in a really good category. And even though we don't consider him to be this normal, he's not like this rusher, he does do enough given how good of a passer he is. And when you add it all up, it is helping him out. So I do think that once the top 4 quarterbacks, the elite dual threats, are off the board, Joe Burrow is absolutely the pick to make if you're going quarterback.
It was so fun to watch him, really just all of last season. But I know Joe Goodberry is one of the best, Bengals kind of reporters out there. And he's always talked about getting the LSU version of Burrow out there. And that's when you do start seeing the playmaking ability, the management of the pocket where, coming off the ACL and then 2023, having that preseason calf injury, we've seen the more limited versions of Burrow. Still very good when he has to, get the ball out quicker. But man, when he can start moving around, I mean, we see quarterbacks for years be afraid of stepping up into the pocket. Dwain, Burrow last year was literally sprinting up there, just to hit Chase on some 20-yard dig and then watch the guy go for 60. So really does give his guys every chance. And I know the sack numbers are high, but man, there's a great interview from Burrow after that Super Bowl where a guy legit asked him like, hey, you took 6 sacks, and you saw Burrow kind of smirk and just say, look, I understand that if it's 3rd down, we're in field goal range. Like, yeah, we need to go ahead and make sure we're getting points on the board. But hey, if I'm sitting there and I'm going to take a sack and it's going to be a punt either way, why wouldn't I hold the ball as long as possible? And when you do actually take that next step, look at his pressure to sack ratio. I mean, it goes from 17% on 1st and 2nd down all the way up to 28% on 3rd down. So again, didn't control for every variable there, but really be careful, guys, about just looking at sack totals and saying, oh, that guy's a bad pocket manager. Joe Burrow, again, in my opinion, still very much one of the best, even though, just make sure you're healthy, man, because the Bengals do need you. Now for the main event, Dwain, it is someone I have been drafting pretty much nonstop for the better part of the last decade, Mike Gesicki himself. But hey, now we have a 3-year, $25.5 million contract. Now we have a season where we did see him emerge as a trusted trusted friend of Burrow. Even in the offseason, Burrow was talking about needing to re-sign Big Mike. Hilariously, Gesicki afterwards said like he was even shocked to hear Burrow say that at his press conference. So unfortunately, Eric All, the really good-looking, basically fourth-round rookie from last year, did have another issue with his knee. He is not expected to play throughout 2025. So, we got maybe some other guys who are a bit more traditional inline options than Mike. But do you think there's a chance, Dwain, based on the money, based on the fact that, with all due respect to Yoshi Voss and Jermaine Burton, there's not like a cemented wide receiver 3 in this offense. Could we see Gesicki flirt with triple-digit targets as Joe Burrow's number 3 pass game option?
Yeah, I think there's a chance. I feel like it's probably going to be more of a rotation. To your point, he did get paid. Your technical question on here is what's your excitement level rated 1 to 10 on drafting Mike Gesicki this year? And my response was, is Tee Higgins out? If Tee Higgins is out, give me an 8 on that answer.
Okay.
If Tee Higgins is playing, that's probably more like a 4 on this answer. But to your point, it's not like the slot is really locked down. Yes, Yoshi Voss locked it down last year, but it's not like he was really doing a lot with it. So there is a path that they use him more there. There is also a path, to your point, with Eric All being out, that he gets a little bit more work as the inline tight end. If you look at some of the backups that are on the offense, like Tanner Hudson, et cetera, like they're kind of the same thing as Gesicki. So why would they want to give them more snaps? So I do think there's this potential path. If we did get Mike Gesicki at an 80% route participation rate in this Bengals offense, we would like it. Like he would have a great shot at finishing as a top 12 tight end in fantasy football. The question is like, can he get there? Right? Because the range of outcomes here is he's 55% to probably 70 is like reasonable, but like there's a stretch case where I could see him getting to 80%. So here's the thing though, why I don't mind drafting him even in redraft formats. Obviously, we like him in best ball. It's very easy to take him there. But what if they do make this change in, and after 2 weeks, we're like, whoa, man, Mike Gesicki, 78% route participation. You're going to like that, honestly, probably better than almost every other tight end that you're taking from like pick tight end 15 to like tight end 20. You're going to be more excited about Joe Burrow with Mike Gesicki than any of those others. So I think that's where it makes sense. And then if it's not working out, and you just kind of have to wait for the injury games, well, fine, you just cut him. Just cut him from your team. But there is an upside scenario if they come out and surprise us in those early few weeks and the unveil is, oh, my God, Mike Gesicki's playing a full-time role. You're really going to like that.
How high do you think people would be drafting Mike Gesicki if it was the exact same player, but it was a 4th-round rookie coming into this offense? I feel like he'd be going tight end 15.
Yeah, like if it was if Ty Warren had landed here. Imagine that.
And or not even Tyler Warren, but just like if it was, because think about
Harold Fannin Jr.
Yeah, exactly. If Harold Fannin Jr. was on the Bengals right now, we'd be drafting him 7 spots higher just positionally than what Big Mike is.
Yeah, probably. You're probably right. I think the main thing that like people look at, Ian, when they look at Gesicki is just the fact that like he hasn't ever turned into really being this elite target earner, which you don't have to be at tight end, guys. But last year was a career high for this man. Joe Burrow does like him. Targets per route run at 20% last season. His yards per route run, his second highest of his career at 1.58. You got to go all the way back to year 3 in Miami when he posted a 1.60. So it was his best season from an underlying data perspective. And when Joe Burrow comes out and makes these comments, like data actually backs it up. Like Joe Burrow likes throwing the ball to Mike Gesicki. So if we could just get that route participation rate up, it would be great. Last year, 58%, right? And that's been Gesicki's challenge for his career, Ian. Here are his route participation rates, adjusting for the games he missed for injury. 42, 73, nice. 74, nice. 78, nice. 55, 54, 58. And so he just hasn't been able to get into that role where he can play enough snaps. But if somehow that does get unlocked for him this year in the Bengals offense, it's something we would certainly be happy about in fantasy football.
Only 2 touchdowns last year as well. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to score 15, but I think 7 or 8 with Joe Burrow throwing for 40 plus, within his potential range of outcomes. So he's my 3rd most drafted tight end of the offseason. And again, it's just even removing everything you know about the guy or your feelings on him, just in the late round tight end streets, we want a player who has some level of, devotion from their team. We have that with this contract extension. We like someone who is a plus pass catcher. That's exactly what Mike is. We want a really good offense. I mean, Cade Otton is the other guy that you can make some of those arguments for, but that Buccaneers offense is somehow even more crowded than what we have in Cincy. I also just think Gesicki is a bit better of an overall talent and just athlete than what we have going on with Otton. So that has been, again, the main event here. And I just want to end the show so I can get back to drafting more Mike Gesicki. But Dwain, first, before we do that, we do have to go over the win total. Resting at a lowly, I believe it is 9.5 here. So certainly, a situation where I believe in Burrow, I believe in Chase, I believe in Higgins, I obviously believe in Mike Gesicki, but man, I got to go under. This could very well be the worst defense in the league, depending on if they finally get these edge rushers getting them happy or not. I understand we could have another situation where it's 35, 34 every single game because this offense keeps them in it. But this is such a top-heavy roster right now, and it's just really tough for me to ignore all the problems that could be going on the other side of the ball. So this is not, hey, go bet this. I feel super confident. I think they're going 9-8 or maybe 8-9, 10-7, something like that. So give me under 9.5. I don't feel great about it. What say you?
I'm going over. I mean, look, the NFL is still a quarterback league. Yes, defenses have found a way to limit that, but they haven't necessarily found a way to limit Joe Burrow. So if the defense is just a little bit better, right? Now, I get it. Like some of the moves that are going on, maybe they'll have to be in that same kind of wild mode that they were last year. Obviously, that was a limiting factor. But, man, when you have Burrow with these weapons, I think you can win without a defense. You can get over this 9.5 wins. Like I think you can. So I'm just betting on Joe Burrow. I'm betting on Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, those players all being in their prime, and that just being too much offense. So give me the over on the 9.5.
It is a wild thing where, if you assume Trey Hendrickson is going to get signed and be playing and stuff. I mean, the Bengals, if you just ranked every single team's top 5, top 6 players, you're not going to need more than one hand to count the number of rosters you would take ahead. But then everyone else, I mean, they might be freaking less, So it's one of these situations where going to be a lot of fun either way. Hopefully for Chris Allen and all of our Bengals fans out there, it leads to more than 9.5 wins. But guys, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show. We appreciate you tuning in. Like and subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. And otherwise, just have a great rest of your day. For Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.